Hey everybody, welcome to the GMB show. In this show, I'm really pleased to have the very lovely Mercedes Pollmeier. Now, we actually kind of interesting thing here. I was reading her book, and at the time I didn't even realize that she had mentioned, me and GMB in the book. I was on an airplane, was reading your book, and all of a sudden at the beginning of the chapter, there's this quote. In each chapter, you have these quotes. And I was like, wow, that looks real familiar, and realized it was a quote for me. And I kind of freaked out. I was pretty happy that someone that actually, knew about me. So it was pretty cool. Anyway, I want to thank you for being here on the show. A little bit of background about Mercedes here. I'm just going to kind of read a bit of this. Strength conditioning coach, right now based out of Seattle. Originally, we can get into that a little bit later, but via Colorado, via somewhere else. Right now, working with, you specialize in performance programs specifically designed for climbers and outdoor alpinists, depending on where you come from. Located in Seattle, you have a master's in human movement, and pretty much she's awesome, everybody. And for today's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of fun stuff. So thank you for being here with me, Mercedes. A little bit of intro about yourself. Let us know what's going on with you.
Yeah. Well, I actually grew up in Australia being a tennis player. That's pretty much my athletic background. And I actually came over to the US when I was 17 on a full scholarship to play tennis. I was so thrilled as a teenager. But I left home and went and played college tennis for 4 years. I actually went to University of Northern Iowa, and then transferred over to Metro State University in Denver for a few years. And that's actually where I started climbing. And when I graduated, I really wanted to give the semi-pro level in tennis, a good go. That's always been my dream as a kid growing up. So in doing so, I actually was able to try out for the Olympics. And I needed someone to essentially whip me into shape for my strength training, because I really didn't do a lot of that. And I realized I was quite weak in that aspect. And the coach was actually based out of a climbing gym. His name's Dave Wall, amazing guy. And he actually got me into climbing more. I was climbing once in a while, but it was you should really work on your upper body strength. You should probably boulder more. So bouldering is it's another facet of climbing. This sport climbing and bouldering and trad climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I decided to try it, and I did really well. I was super strong. I actually made it onto the Olympic team. But as a team, we actually didn't make it to the Olympics, unfortunately. But it was an amazing experience for me to travel and do that. But then after that, I decided that I would give up tennis, because at that point I was being beat by 16-year-olds. And, I was 22, 23, realizing, okay, this is probably the end for me for my professional career. So decided to go into climbing, and Dave, my coach, he helped me through all of that. And he actually inspired me to become a strength coach and go to school and learn about movement. So I'll be forever grateful for him. And so, yeah, pretty much that's where my story with climbing begins, is in Denver with him. And I went and got my master's because I'm kind of I need to know as much as possible. So going to school to do that and learning just how to research, I think that was probably what I got out of that. And yeah, so here I am coaching climbers. I was a competitive climber for a while too, and actually did decent at that for only climbing for a few years at the time.
Yeah, so you competed at the national level, really. And so, yeah, it's always good to have that kind of experience, get into not just, the physical practice, but the mental practice of everything, and know what it's like to compete and help those high-level athletes. speaking of high level athletes, just kind of get into some of the questions if you're cool with it. Um, so, for example, working with outdoor, athletes, in particular climbing and things like that, especially these high level athletes, I really want to hear a little bit more about that sort of training. For example, and of course it depends on each particular individual, but really like to hear some of the main things that you like to focus on when you're working with some of the high level climbers, because obviously they want to improve their climbing, but what are you looking at really, as kind of a broad overview of where you want to take them in their training?
Yeah, this is a tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for adults who they've been, usually if they're high level climbers, they've been climbing for maybe 5 to 8 years or so. So they're actually highly skilled climbers. So, like their technique's actually really good, for the most part. So what I look for is how they regulate themselves while they
Oh,
climb. So
yeah, yeah.
that's really what I look for. And like they may be a little weak in certain positions, so we do tackle that. But in terms of like it is more of like a mental training and how relaxed the climber can be, and setting up specific drills so that they're constantly working on like their breathing. That's huge. Like holding your breath when things become really, really difficult, you lose oxygen and you end up just falling off. So you have to continue, like learn how to continue to breathe when things get really difficult. Learning how to control your anxiety in high pressure situations, especially if you're a competitive climber, but also for if you're climbing something outside. So climbers have these things called projects where
Hmm.
they aspire to climb something that is just a little bit beyond their level. And when they approach that climb, their anxiety tends to elevate, and so it's figuring out how to regulate that as well. But I think the most important thing, especially for competitive climbers, is how they read the sequence of moves. And I think that's probably what I work on the most is sequencing and visualizing how you're going to move, with everything, like your hands, your body, your
Yeah.
feet. How your feet feel as they turn on a foothold. It's like all these like micro little things, and I would say that that's probably the biggest thing that I work on with most of the climbers.
This is just so interesting your answer is this. It just so happens to be that we have our Alpha Posse, which is our online community, and every month I do a special challenge for them where I create either a series of videos or we talk about something that we do over the length of a month, over the period of a month. This month is better awareness by learning more about your breathing and then taking it to the point where you're able to apply that to new movements that you're learning. And so this is exactly what we're talking about in
Yeah.
these videos. And it's so cool to hear you talk about this because I'm just fascinated about this. And just like you said, rock climbing is the same. Everywhere you go, whenever you're learning something new and you're going just beyond what you're very
Mhm.
comfortable with, you're going to brace down and hold your breath. So focusing on the breath and, focusing on solving those problems, if you will, like you talked about, it's just, yeah, it's so cool because, of course, that's what we're all after, right? And even high level athletes, and maybe especially high level athletes, when they get towards the competition arena, whether it be against an opponent, whether it be in a bouldering competition, or even just like what you said, when they're working on solving a new problem that they want to work on a new line or something they want to accomplish, they're going to have that anxiety. So all
Yeah.
comes back down to the breathing, right? The mental side of it, excuse me, we'll get to that in just a minute, but right now, well, actually, we just talk about it right now because climbing is such, a not just a physical activity, but so mental, and for the reasons that you said. I mean, let's be honest, bouldering, yeah, okay, it's at a height where it's still safe where if you let go. But the thing is you're still up there, and it's pretty scary. And looking at
Yeah.
trad climbing, hey, if you have a big ripper and you come off that wall, that's some pretty scary stuff right there. So, as far as the mental aspect of it, what are some specific drills or things that you work with your athletes on in order to help them become better mentally? And I do know that you work a lot with children as well. So maybe this is
Mhm.
something that you do with the kids, and because I teach kids over here too, and so I actually have a lot of things I do with the kids. But I'm really interested to hear how you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, One of my favorite drills, actually, it's I don't actually have a name for it. This is funny. I should
You
probably come
gotta
up with
name
a
it.
name.
Name it.
Yeah, I gotta name
Copyright.
it. Um, we essentially give the person or the kid like 1 minute to look at a new line. So if we're working inside of a gym, a lot of these people have seen the boulder problems because they're up. But if I take them to a section of the gym and I say, okay, you're going to turn around and you're going to look at this route, I'm going to give you 1 minute to look at every single route and visualize it. And then you're going to turn around and explain it back to me without
Wow.
looking at it.
Cool.
Um, so this is a really great, it's a memory game,
Yeah.
essentially. Like it's
Yeah.
memory. And this, like rehearsing it in your mind, like as you're looking at it and then rehearsing it when you're not looking at it, it's like creating these motor patterns that you're already climbing it, so it really helps, especially for competitive climbing, that you're rehearsing before you even get on and try it. And I think this is one of my favorites. That we and there's different variations that we have done. We've had people draw the sequence on pieces of paper, maybe mimic movement instead of
Nice.
just explaining it. So there's different ways of doing that. So that's one of my favorites.
That's absolutely wonderful. I remember back in my days as a competitive gymnast that my coach used to have us before competition. We'd lie down and close our eyes, and we have to perform the routine in our head. And I still have a habit of doing that. For example, when I was working on my one arm handstands and when I'm working on new movements. Right now, I'm getting back into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So the movements that I'm doing, I'm trying to go through that before I do it to set myself up for success, if you will. And it sounds very similar to what you're doing. I love that. And you got to put a name on that because that's pretty cool. But yeah, setting up those good neural patterns to make sure that it's not just go do it, but you actually understand what needs to happen before you do it. And I think especially in rock climbing, this is really cool because if you can solve that problem before you actually start in on it, well, half the battle is probably won right there. I'm assuming,
Mhm.
of course, I'm not some big rock climber or anything like that, but I can see how this would be extremely beneficial, and especially
Yeah,
with bouldering and having major, you know, uh, launches, where you might have to do super reaches and things like that, and understanding maybe conserving energy for certain points or something or certain places so that you can save that energy for some of the more difficult, I don't even know what you would call it, problems that
cruxes.
arise. Cruxes, thank you. Yeah. So I'm just
Yeah,
assuming. So
yeah. Yeah, for competition climbing, it really comes down to the winner, for the competition is usually the person who has attempted the boulder problems the least and got to the top. So that's essentially like if they can do it the first time they go, they get all of the points. And then, every attempt after that, they get deducted points. And so like in bouldering, and so there's bouldering and sport climbing, and both have their own competitions. And so for bouldering, I'd say that if you can figure out the puzzle in that as fast as possible, um, and then you have multiple attempts to try it. In sport climbing, you have to read everything. It's so much longer. So you're probably previewing the route at least for 2 minutes, and then you only get one attempt because once you fall, that's it. You're
done.
done. You actually don't get another attempt. So like these two are actually almost like two different sports, and how you train for them is actually also quite different.
Yeah, really,
You know?
that's to me. It's just fascinating because I mean, what I'm teaching, for example, in GMB, even though there's not a particular problem, we still have these movement challenges that we're after. And just listening to what you're saying is giving me some good ideas about how I can apply that for some other things. Let's look at a little at some of the protocols maybe. So, there's just hundreds of different movements and things like that that you could use in order to become a better climber. But I do know that you have just a few things that you prescribe, I guess. For the biggest bang for the buck. Could you mind letting us know a little bit about that in terms of strength training and becoming more efficient at that?
Yeah. Essentially, like what I've learned from working with climbers and a lot of other outdoor athletes is that they haven't actually spent a lot of time strength training. And so I've really pared it back to like three very basic movements, and that you can essentially build on as you get better. And, it's the body weight squat, the push up, and the back bend,
Nice.
So you don't need any equipment. And that's, I think, very important for doing things when you're traveling. A lot of climbers and outdoor athletes tend to travel a lot. So I thought about this and how to create something for those people who have very minimal strength training background, and being able to strength train in a safe way with minimal feedback from a coach. Like they can kind of work on this on their own, take video footage of themselves, and be able to kind of self-correct with a little bit of guidance. And I feel like those three, like there isn't any pulling, but pushing is so essential for climbers because they're so dominant in their lats, and their shoulders are usually more forward and their chest is like kind of concave. So they really don't actually have like strong pec muscles. So teaching them to be able to move in that direction as well. And it's just, it's the opposite of what they do constantly.
No, but that makes sense. I mean, it really does and I think it's always funny. I remember Lynn Hill. She was one of my favorite climbers of all time, right? And I just remember, she was one of the first ones. I mean, it was an El Cap, I guess, and she was going up there, and she was like, I'm really strong upper body, but thanks to my legs, what's what gets me up there. And and I'm always thinking back to the guys, because let's just be honest, like guys, when they first start bouldering or something, it's all upper body, right? Instead of being able to use their body more efficiently. And so, but it's interesting what you're saying about everything coming in, and now I can see really why that back bend also is a big help for that. In your book, Simple Strength, this is kind of the basis of everything, are these three exercises. And I do know that, you have a lot of different variations and things in there, but, let's look at like someone who's just kind of looking to be a better overall athlete. And so, the goal really, let's be honest, is not to get good at training, or basically not to train more. And so, could you give us a little bit of an idea of how we can better use these three movements so that we don't get so focused on thinking that, we should be training all the time, instead of training for the things that we want to be able to do better, if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, and that's how I go about the training protocols for most people, is that you should be working on your skills for like 90% of the time, and 10% of the time you're working on like the training, the actual strength training part of it. And that's really like the philosophy of like these three movements, is that you work on like your warm up, you work on it, and you do several, like maybe 10 to 20 reps of the easy stuff. And then you work on things that are a little bit more challenging. So let's say that, I can do my body weight squat pretty easily, but I find it challenging to do the pistol squat. Okay. And so I'm working on a few variations to work up to that, but I keep everything very simple. Like I don't do a high amount of reps. Like there's no protocol that I'm trying to follow. It's just, let's work on these movements, and then that's how I'm going to get stronger. And, like, especially with outdoor athletes, we don't want to increase a lot of muscle mass. So it's keeping the strength to weight ratio, like we want to be stronger and as light as possible.
Exactly.
So reps don't really matter. It's more how well can you execute the movement. And so yeah, for climbers, like being able to do single leg squats, that's really, really important because they do these crazy movements where they're only on one foot, like on their toe, and they're gonna have to like almost jump out of that position in a pistol
Yeah.
squat. And so being able to focus purely just on position and that movement, I think is super beneficial. And it takes it's time away from climbing. You can work on these really great movements while you and you're resting your climbing muscles.
Yeah. No, it
Yeah.
makes sense, and just to reiterate here, I mean, keep it simple. Focus on strength rather than, or focus on that strength by increasing the difficulty of the movement rather than just doing a gazillion regular push-ups. Maybe work
Yeah.
on one arm push-up or something like that.
Yeah.
So focus on that strength. I love it. Quality of movement, same thing we talk about. I got a question for you. Let's go into some of the questions for you. As a
Uh-huh.
professional athlete yourself, what has changed for you over the years in your own training?
Yeah, I actually started off as more of a traditional like strength training athlete. Like I did a lot of snatches and cleans.
Okay.
Like that's just how they trained us in college. And so that was like really my first that was the introduction to strength training
Mm-hmm.
as a for cross training. And so that's kind of just how I thought it was, like high repetition, like we're following this very rigid program, and like the periodization and all of that, and actually becoming a strength and conditioning coach, you learn that protocol.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that was one of my first certifications. But then as I actually got older, like that was great. Like I think I built a pretty decent like base of strength doing that, and I learned some really cool moves. But honestly, like now, like having a full-time job, trying to train, um, having a family life, like for me now, like it is all about quality of movement. Like I don't even have like if I can like train for like 45 minutes, even just half an hour, like every day. So it's like short but like high frequency. And that's how I've been able to keep my body pretty healthy through all of this, even though, in the past I've trained too much, I've overtrained. And I think I've learned a lot from that. And I just don't have time for that anymore either.
Sure.
So I've been able to keep a pretty high level of strength, even though it's been really short and but high frequency. So that's really what I've learned, and that you don't need to overdo it. Just do just enough, but really pay attention to what you're doing. Um,
Nice awareness
yeah,
of what's going on. Yeah, and I mean, you and I are so similar in the fact that we run businesses and we still coach and we still train and we
yeah,
still want to be able to do this kind of stuff. So it's really cool to hear that that way of training for you is working for you. So another question: what advice would you give yourself if you could go back a few years as your own coach?
I would say to have some patience. You know, as a climber, I got pretty good very fast, and that might not be the correct thing at the time. I actually ended up getting a lot of finger injuries because, like, you learn that, okay, muscles develop faster than tendons.
Yep.
And like like yes, I got really good, but then I got injured a lot. So
Okay.
um and that was also just part of the learning process. And now I try to tell my clients, like, please, like, don't worry, you're going to get better as long as you stay consistent, and you don't need to climb for 4 or 5 hours a day. You just,
What? What? Yeah, I
yeah,
hear that all
and
the time too. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's probably what
Tell yourself
if I
about
was
that.
my own
Yeah.
coach, yeah, I'd be like, just take your time, be consistent, and it'll come, and you're gonna see all of the improvement that you want. Yeah.
All right. Final advice for our listeners who maybe want to get into climbing or maybe just get a little better at climbing.
Yeah, I think if you have a climbing gym, this is the best place to try it. Like obviously being outside is where where you want to be when you're climbing. But inside, if it's your first time going, climbing it's such an abstract sport that you may feel a little lost. Like, what does it all mean? I think just having someone maybe at the gym just like show you a couple things and just go have fun. Like you don't have to follow any of the rules of like you have to have your hand here and here. Just go on and just like try a couple moves, and it's like no big deal. And no one is ever judging you in the climbing gym. I feel like I get that, like I hear that a lot from some beginners who are like, oh, the gym is so crowded. I feel like I don't want to climb because people are watching me. And well, they're watching you, but they're not judging you. They're like, cool, that person is doing something really amazing and they're trying really hard. That's so great. And you actually have people who cheer you on in the gym because they want you to get better. And that's one thing I love about this sport is that the community is so supportive. So yeah, like don't be intimidated, like, and yeah, just throw yourself at it.
I love it. This is so cool. Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. Where can we find more information on you and everything you're doing?
Yeah. So actually my website is betaathletics.com, BETA athletics.com. And I'm actually changing my company name. So it'll soon be Modus Athletica, MODUS. But that's going to change here very soon, actually. Yeah, and I have a book, Simple Strength, if you guys ever want to read that.
And I'm in the book.
And yes,
Ryan. I just had to say that. I was so excited. I'm sorry. I was just like, oh my God, I'm in the book.
Several times, like with Ryan.
We are going to post the links, everyone, where you can find out more about Mercedes and the cool stuff that she's doing. Great advice at the end there. Don't worry. People aren't judging. Have fun. Keep doing it. Have patience. Go climbing. Thanks again, Mercedes.
Thanks
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
For more great info, join us over at gmb.io. And be sure to check us out on iTunes and YouTube.